Welcome the anointed ones. Nothing disturbs a crowd more deeply than witnessing an individual they abandoned in the past finally arrive at a destination they never imagined that person could ever touch. There exists a peculiar tendency within human behavior that almost no one discusses out loud. Society feels entirely at ease with stories of hardship. They grasp those stories easily. They feel sympathy for those stories. But the instant the person who battled quietly begins to win, particularly without assistance, recognition, or authorization, the entire mood transforms. All at once, the room grows a little quieter. Not because people despise achievement. That is the comfortable explanation. The deeper reality is far more disturbing. Achievement becomes deeply uncomfortable when it emerges from someone whose victory was never anticipated. Psychologists have long documented a pattern known as status expectation bias. The concept is straightforward. Individuals unconsciously forecast where other people belong in life. They develop silent hierarchies in their thoughts about who will advance, who will stay ordinary, and who will struggle without end. Those expectations grow so deeply rooted that they begin to feel like objective truth rather than personal opinion. Now, here is where the situation flips. When someone shatters that invisible ranking system, when the individual others quietly dismissed ends up winning entirely alone, the human brain struggles to make sense of it, and that is precisely where the tension begins to build. Because if you triumphed without the connections, without the cheering audience, without the safety cushion, then your victory communicates something people cannot easily dismiss. It demonstrates that the principles they thought governed achievement might not be as fixed as they once believed, and that awareness can leave people profoundly unsettled. Here is the portion nobody enjoys acknowledging aloud. Many individuals are perfectly comfortable backing someone as long as that person remains slightly beneath them. It preserves the social arrangement as tidy and predictable. But the moment that same person ascends beyond what was expected, the emotional calculation shifts. Now respect competes with something else entirely: comparison. And comparison is an extremely dangerous feeling for the human ego, because the mind begins performing calculations it never intended to perform. How did they manage it? When did they overtake me? What did they perceive that I missed? Occasionally, the answers to those questions are straightforward, yet harsh. While others were chatting, you were working. While others were observing, you were absorbing. While others were holding out for ideal conditions, you were constructing within imperfect ones. And when the outcome finally surfaces, people react in ways that initially appear puzzling. Some congratulate you with forced expressions. Some suddenly recall they always had faith in you. Curious how that recollection emerges only after the celebration ends, and some become oddly quiet, resembling someone who just recognized the board shifted while they were not watching. A touch of humor reveals this even more clearly. Human beings can observe someone struggling for a decade and feel completely at ease. But let that same individual succeed in year 11, and suddenly people begin behaving like investigators examining a financial crime scene. Wait, how did this occur? Something does not compute, yet the reality is simple: you persisted. And what makes your triumph distinct, what gives it enough force to disturb the emotional equilibrium around you, is that you accomplished it alone. No audience pushing you ahead, no framework sheltering you, no chorus of voices assuring you it was achievable. Simply discipline, stubborn conviction, and a mind that refused to remain within the tiny container other people quietly constructed for you. That kind of journey produces an outcome that does more than simply motivate people. It compels them to reconsider everything they believed about you, and sometimes everything they believed about themselves. And that is precisely why your victory does not simply exist. For certain individuals watching from the edges, it is consuming them from within. Number 1. Your triumph demolished the narrative they constructed about you. Long before the outcome appeared, long before the advancement became visible, many people surrounding you had already authored a quiet story about how your existence would unfold. It was not written on paper, but it existed clearly in their thoughts. In that story, you possessed limitations. In that story, there existed a boundary you were never meant to cross. Perhaps they never voiced it, but they believed it. To them, you were only capable of reaching a particular level, a particular kind of life, a particular ceiling. People engage in this constantly. The human mind enjoys sorting others rapidly because it makes existence feel manageable. Someone gets labeled as the quiet one, the ordinary one, the one who battles, the one who requires assistance. Once those labels adhere, most people cease refreshing the story. They assume the future will simply follow the script they already authored. But when you ascended without their assistance, without their encouragement, and without their endorsement, you did more than simply succeed. You fractured the storyline they had grown comfortable believing. And that kind of shock does something unusual to people. It compels them to face the uncomfortable truth that they misjudged you, not slightly, entirely. The person they mentally positioned in a tiny corner of existence suddenly entered a far larger room. The one they assumed would always remain behind, quietly advanced far ahead. For many people, conceding that kind of error is harder than celebrating your achievement. So their mind begins attempting to shield their ego. Some will revise history and suddenly assert they always believed in you. Others will behave as though your accomplishment is not that remarkable after all. A few might even search for flaws in what you accomplished simply to make themselves feel better about their initial assessment. But deep within, the genuine issue is not your achievement itself. The genuine issue is that your victory revealed something they never anticipated witnessing. The fact that the version of you they carried in their thoughts was entirely incorrect. And when someone's mental narrative about you crumbles like that, it does not simply fade quietly. It lingers. Because every single time they observe where you stand now, it reminds them that the container they once placed you in was far too small, and recognizing that they underestimated you all along can quietly torment a person far longer than they would ever confess. Number 2, your independence exposed their hidden dependence. There is something profoundly uncomfortable about observing someone succeed without the elements most people consider essential. Many people grow up believing advancement only occurs with a strong support network, continuous encouragement, relationships, or someone opening gates for them. They believe that without these elements, the path ahead becomes nearly impossible, so they construct their lives around that conviction. They wait for chances to be delivered to them, for approval to proceed, for the right individuals to appear and make things easier. Then someone like you arrives and quietly breaks that pattern. You advanced without the circle, without the constant reassurance, without the crowd pushing you along. You made choices alone, encountered setbacks alone, and persisted even when nobody was applauding you. And when that kind of independence ultimately leads to victory, it exposes something many people would rather not face. It reveals how heavily they depend on others to take action in their own lives. For some people, that awareness strikes harder than your victory itself, because deep within they begin to perceive the contrast. While they were waiting for the ideal moment, the ideal connection, or the ideal support system, you were simply advancing with whatever you possessed. No safety net, no assurances, simply determination and the willingness to figure things out along the way. That difference creates an uncomfortable reflection. Your journey demonstrates that progress is sometimes less about possessing the right people around you, and more about possessing the courage to advance even when those people are absent. It challenges the quiet conviction that success must always arrive through networks, validation, or approval. And when someone perceives that the path they believed required a crowd was actually possible alone, it rattles their confidence in the principles they have been following. Some people respond by respecting your independence. They recognize the strength required to construct something without leaning on others. But others react differently. Instead of reflecting on their own dependence, they attempt to minimize your journey or search for hidden assistance behind your achievement. Not because they genuinely believe it, but because accepting your independence would mean acknowledging something uncomfortable, that the barriers they believed were holding them back may not have been as solid as they assumed. Number 3, your solitude became evidence that you were stronger than the system around you. Most people are shaped, restricted, and defined by the systems they inhabit. Schools, communities, workplaces, even families quietly establish boundaries on who can succeed, how success appears, and how far someone can advance. These invisible barriers exist everywhere, constructed from expectations, traditions, and the collective assumptions of those around us. They inform people what is realistic and what is beyond reach, often without ever needing to utter a word. For most, life becomes a game of remaining within these invisible lines, following rules that make the system feel predictable and secure. Then arrives someone like you. You walked alone without seeking permission, without waiting for approval, without depending on the people, structures, or systems that everyone else relied upon. You did more than simply advance. You accomplished it on your own terms. And that kind of independent progress reveals something terrifying to those still inside the system. The rules that felt absolute were never absolute at all. By thriving in solitude, you became a living demonstration that the system is not the ultimate measure of power or achievement. Your strength did not originate from the ladder others provided. It originated from within, from a discipline and clarity that could not be controlled or predicted. The systems designed to guide or restrict people suddenly appear fragile when confronted with someone who refuses to be contained by them. That is why your success unsettles people. They are not angered by your victory itself. They are disturbed by what it represents. The notion that someone can rise above expectations, ignore the rules, and still reach heights they believed were unattainable without support. The very system they trusted to measure potential is proven imperfect, and that imperfection reflects their own dependence on it. Your solitude did not simply make you independent, it made you untouchable in ways the system could never account for. While others were occupied following paths carved by convention, you created a path entirely your own, one that the system could not predict, influence, or control. And for those still confined within its boundaries, observing that occur quietly gnaws at them, because it proves that strength and vision do not require permission to exist. Number 4, your survival forced them to confront their own excuses. Most people carry excuses around like invisible shields, and they protect them fiercely. They explain why they have not begun, why they cannot succeed, why the world is unjust, why the timing is not right, why the opportunities are not present. These excuses often feel entirely reasonable because they are constructed on familiar patterns of thinking, experiences, and fear. They provide people the comfort of believing that the reasons they have not advanced are real, external, and unavoidable. Then someone like you succeeds quietly against all odds, without fanfare and without requesting anyone's assistance. That success does not simply illuminate what you have accomplished. It illuminates what everyone else could have accomplished but chose not to. Your achievements function like a mirror they cannot ignore. Suddenly, the carefully constructed walls of reasons and limitations begin to crumble. They realize that what they labeled as barriers were often merely excuses cleverly disguised as truth. It is not that the obstacles were not real at all. Sometimes they were. But while those obstacles became reasons to halt, you transformed them into fuel to advance. You did not wait for perfect conditions. You did not wait for others to clear the path. You did not permit doubt or fear to dictate your next step. You acted. And because you acted, you succeeded. This kind of success can be infuriating to people who have been holding themselves back. It forces them to confront a truth they have long avoided. Perhaps it was not the world, the system, or circumstances that halted them. It was their own unwillingness to push, to risk, to endure when it grew difficult. And that is a harsh truth to accept. So instead of looking inward and facing the uncomfortable reality that they have been excusing themselves from their own potential, some people redirect their frustration outward. They criticize your journey, minimize your achievements, or search for some hidden advantage you must have possessed, not because they genuinely believe you cheated, but because admitting the truth about themselves is far too painful. Your survival, your persistence, and your triumph expose the fragility of their excuses. It is not a gentle revelation. It is a sharp, undeniable proof that while they were still debating why not me, you were already proving why me. And that truth gnaws at them quietly, relentlessly, and in ways they will never fully confess. Number 5, your isolation built a level of clarity they cannot comprehend. Walking alone for extended stretches of life does something rare. It strips away distractions, eliminates noise, and forces a kind of mental focus most people never encounter. While others surround themselves with chatter, advice, opinions, and validation, someone who navigates life alone is compelled to rely on their own judgment, observation, and reasoning. Every decision, every risk, every modest success or failure is measured and processed internally. Over time, this builds a level of clarity that is nearly impossible to fabricate. That clarity is unsettling to observe. People who exist in constant noise rarely perceive the subtle patterns of behavior, the invisible currents of opportunity, or the unspoken weaknesses in systems. They rely on consensus, social cues, and conventional wisdom to guide their choices. But someone who spent years isolated learns to see without filters, to calculate without bias, and to understand situations with a precision that arrives only from being compelled to think independently. When that clarity finally produces outcomes, it unsettles people around you. They can sense it even if they cannot define it. They notice your ability to act decisively when they are still overthinking. They observe the ease with which you navigate obstacles that leave them frustrated. They watch you cut through complexity while they remain entangled in the simplest problems. The most jarring element for them is that this clarity is not loud. It does not announce itself. It manifests in outcomes, in confidence, and in an aura of purpose that is impossible to ignore. The independence that cultivated it makes your success feel unassailable. It forces them to acknowledge that what they assumed required guidance, help, or luck was in reality navigable with focus and insight. And that is why isolation can make someone terrifyingly effective without anyone understanding how. Your solitude became a laboratory where your mind learned to see clearly when others were still squinting through layers of distraction. You developed a vision that cannot easily be influenced, manipulated, or derailed. For those watching from the edges, that kind of clarity is both mesmerizing and maddening, because it proves that the person who appeared alone, quiet, and overlooked was quietly mastering the world while they were busy following the crowd. Number 6. You proved that approval is not a requirement for progress. Most people navigate through life waiting for someone to grant them permission. They wait for approval, recognition, validation, or some form of reassurance that what they are doing is correct. They look for signals from bosses, mentors, friends, or society itself before they feel confident enough to take real action. It is a quiet dependency that most people do not even notice. They have constructed their entire approach to progress around the notion that someone else's opinion is the fuel for their own movement. Then you arrive and completely shatter that pattern. You did not wait for permission. You did not wait for a nod of approval or for someone to hand you the key to advance. You simply acted, you learned, experimented, failed, corrected, and persisted without asking anyone if it was acceptable. That simple refusal to rely on others' validation is revolutionary in a world where most people have become addicted to it. When your progress becomes visible, it sends a quiet shockwave to those who assumed they needed the crowd, the system, or the approval of others to succeed. They observe someone advancing relentlessly, building, achieving, and thriving without the safety net they believed was essential, and that realization strikes them in a way they were not prepared for. Suddenly, their carefully structured belief that success is conditional on recognition begins to feel flimsy. Your victory proves something powerful. The only permission genuinely required to advance is the permission you grant yourself. Progress is not contingent on applause, encouragement, or anyone's belief in you. It is contingent on action, persistence, and the unwillingness to be halted by the lack of external support. For those who relied on validation to feel secure, this truth is destabilizing. Your independence exposes the quiet dependency they have built into their lives. It is not simply that you succeeded. It is that you accomplished it without ever needing them. Your progress becomes a statement, a living proof that reliance on external approval is optional. And observing someone thrive under those conditions challenges their core assumptions, leaving them both in awe and quietly uncomfortable. You did not simply win, you rewrote the rules for anyone who believed they needed permission to advance. Number 7. Your discipline was constructed in silence while they were distracted. Most people believe success occurs in grand, flashy moments. They assume that the achievements they witness are the result of sudden breakthroughs, fortunate opportunities, or external assistance. They rarely notice the countless hours of quiet, unglamorous work that rendered those moments possible. While others were scrolling through social media, debating who said what or waiting for the right time, you were silently grinding, refining your skills, and sharpening your mind. Discipline is rarely dramatic. It does not announce itself. It appears in the small choices nobody is watching, the extra hour spent learning, the repeated practice nobody observes, the sacrifices that go unseen. That is where genuine strength is constructed, in the silent spaces between action and recognition. While the world remains busy with distractions, those who commit to invisible work accumulate a power that is quiet, relentless, and unshakable. When your results finally surface, people assume it happened overnight. They observe the finished product, the polished outcome, the success that appears sudden and effortless. What they do not see are the years of repetition, of focus, of resisting every temptation to take the easy path. They do not see the resilience required to persist when no one was applauding. And that gap between perception and reality creates a kind of awe, and often envy, that quietly gnaws at them. Your discipline became a weapon they cannot comprehend because it was invisible. You were not seeking approval, validation, or acknowledgement. You were building momentum when no one was paying attention. And that momentum ultimately became unstoppable. That is why your success can feel so shocking to people. They are only now observing the result of effort that never required an audience. The truth is simple and brutal. While others were distracted by noise, you were building a life. You were training your mind, your patience, and your skill in ways that no one else bothered to do. And when the results arrive, they are undeniable. The discipline forged in silence does not simply produce outcomes. It produces a version of you that cannot be ignored, underestimated, or controlled. And for those who observed but never acted, that reality is both inspiring and painfully uncomfortable. Number 8. You became proof that isolation is not always a weakness. Most people grow up believing being alone is a disadvantage. They equate isolation with rejection, failure, or weakness. Society reinforces this idea at every turn. Success stories are often presented as collaborative efforts surrounded by teams, mentors, and networks. People are taught to believe that if you do not possess a crowd behind you, you are missing something essential. That belief becomes so deeply ingrained that they assume anyone moving alone must be struggling, lost, or falling behind. Then someone like you arrives, quietly walking their path, building, learning, and surviving in solitude. And when that solitary effort transforms into success, it challenges one of the deepest assumptions people hold. That connection and external support are prerequisites for achievement. Your life becomes living proof that independence can be more than sufficient, that being alone can actually be a superpower. Isolation forces a kind of self-reliance most people never develop. When there is no one to guide you, no one to validate your choices, and no one to catch you when you fall, your mind learns to navigate uncertainty on its own. You make decisions based on observation, experience, and instinct. You develop patience, clarity, and resilience that others surrounded by constant noise and influence rarely cultivate. The solitude sharpens your perception, strengthens your discipline, and deepens your understanding of people, systems, and life itself. When people finally observe the result of your solitary journey, it unsettles them. They are confronted with a truth they did not expect. Being alone did not hold you back. It propelled you forward. While they were waiting for the right people, the right moment, or the right opportunity, you were quietly building a foundation strong enough to withstand any storm. Your success becomes undeniable evidence that isolation is not weakness. It is preparation. And that realization quietly gnaws at anyone who ever assumed they needed others to succeed. It forces them to question their dependence, their choices, and the limits they placed on themselves. You did not simply survive your solitude. You thrived in it, and in doing so you redefined what it means to rise alone. Number 9, your success revealed who was quietly hoping you would fail. Success possesses a way of revealing hidden truths, and one of the harshest is how people around you genuinely feel when you rise. While you were struggling, learning, and grinding in silence, most observers appeared neutral, even supportive. Some smiled, nodded, or offered advice. Others remained quiet. It all felt normal. But the moment your efforts produced visible results, the mask slipped. Suddenly the energy in the room shifted. The people who pretended to be neutral or indifferent became uneasy. The ones who had quietly doubted you now had no choice but to react. What is unsettling for them is not your success itself. It is the realization that for years they were hoping you would not make it. Perhaps it was not conscious at first, but deep within some people were silently counting on your failure. They were comfortable with the story of you struggling or remaining within the bounds they imagined for you. Your rise destroyed that story. Every milestone you reached became a reminder that their quiet wish for you to stay small, to falter, or to remain just okay had failed. This kind of revelation can feel almost contagious. Envy, disbelief, and frustration begin bubbling beneath the surface. People who appeared supportive now show subtle signs of resentment. Compliments become forced, smiles become tight, and conversations change tone. You begin to notice the shift, not because it is dramatic, but because it is unavoidable. Your existence, your progress becomes a mirror, reflecting the quiet hopes and fears of those who never wanted to see you win. And that mirror is brutal. It does not lie, it does not soften, and it does not permit excuses. Your achievements stand there undeniable while their hidden expectations of your failure crumble. Your success does not simply elevate you, it exposes them. It reveals who was silently rooting for you to fall, who underestimated your resilience, and who relied on your struggle to feel safe in their own mediocrity. That exposure is sharp, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. Your rise, accomplished on your terms, forces people to confront something they never planned to face. The reality that they were quietly hoping you would not succeed. And there is nothing more unsettling than being confronted with your own misjudgment in plain sight. Number 10. Your growth forced them to rethink their place in the world. When you rise alone, quietly and relentlessly, it does not simply affect your life. It shakes the invisible structure of everyone around you. People inhabit a world constructed on assumptions and expectations. They mentally chart their social hierarchy, their professional map, their understanding of who leads, who follows, and who stays in their lane. For years, they may have believed they possessed a clear picture of their place in this world. That picture feels safe because it is predictable. They know where they belong, who outranks them, and who stands below them. It is comfortable because it makes life appear orderly. Then someone like you arrives and breaks that structure. You do not simply advance. You leap beyond the expectations everyone placed on you. Suddenly the map they relied upon no longer fits reality. They assumed they understood the boundaries of your potential, and yet here you stand, walking past them in ways they never predicted. That growth forces a quiet, often unspoken reckoning. They begin to reassess everything, their assumptions about your capabilities, their own abilities, and even the rules they have been following to measure success. This is not a loud confrontation. It is subtle, creeping, and unnerving. Each milestone you hit becomes evidence that the social order they counted upon is malleable. That success is not as tied to position, privilege, or approval as they once thought. Their comfort zone begins to shrink as they realize that you are not constrained by the same boundaries. What they believed was fixed is now fluid, and your rise demonstrates that the hierarchy they relied upon was never as secure as they believed. Some people respond with admiration, quietly impressed by your determination and skill. Others react with insecurity, envy, or defensiveness, struggling to reconcile their expectations with the new reality. Your success forces them to confront an uncomfortable truth. If you can rise beyond what they believed possible, then perhaps their own place in the world is not as secure as they assumed. Your growth does not simply elevate you, it destabilizes their perception, reshapes the mental map they relied upon, and forces them to face the reality that the world is far bigger and far less predictable than they ever permitted themselves to see. Number 11. You became a mirror they cannot look away from. When you rise alone, your life begins to reflect more than simply your achievements. It reflects possibilities, courage, and choices that others quietly denied themselves. People often move through life comparing themselves to others, measuring their success against visible milestones. But when someone close achieves without help, without shortcuts, without waiting for approval. It becomes more than comparison. It becomes a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable because they reveal truths people are not ready to face. Your journey exposes what others avoided. It reveals the risks they did not take, the effort they postponed, and the opportunities they permitted to slip away. While you were building, learning, and pushing past limits, some were settling for comfort, convincing themselves that circumstances were stronger than willpower. Your results shine a light on the difference between movement and stagnation, between persistence and excuses, between belief and hesitation. That light is not gentle. It forces recognition. Even if they do not want to admit it, they observe what could have been theirs if they had acted differently. Being a mirror does not make people angry at you. It makes them confront themselves. It triggers feelings they never prepared for: regret, envy, and a silent frustration at their own choices. They might smile, nod, or congratulate you, but deep within, every achievement you reach reminds them of the paths they abandoned, the moments they hesitated, and the potential they left untapped. Your success does not simply exist in isolation. It interacts with their perception of their own life. That reflection is sharp, unavoidable, and enduring. Unlike competition, which can be ignored, a mirror shows them the reality they have been hiding from themselves. You did not simply achieve. You revealed the gap between action and hesitation, between courage and fear, between choice and excuse. And for those watching, it is impossible to look away. Your life quietly forces them to confront their own inaction while witnessing your forward motion. And that contrast can be both mesmerizing and maddening. In becoming a mirror, you did not request permission. You did not wait for their recognition. You simply advanced. And in doing so, you exposed a truth about them they could no longer deny. The difference between their life and yours was always in their hands, not in circumstances. Number 12. Your confidence now feels threatening because it was earned without them. There exists a kind of confidence that makes people uneasy, the type that is not borrowed, not dependent on approval, and not fake bravado. Most people's confidence depends on others, a nod from authority, praise from peers, or the reassurance that they are doing things the right way. It is fragile because it lives outside them, tied to the reactions and perceptions of others. But the confidence you built is different. You earned it in silence, through struggle, through solitude, and through the relentless grind that no one else witnessed. It did not require their permission, validation, or approval. That is why it feels threatening. When people observe someone moving with that kind of unshakable self-assurance, it is intimidating. Even if they attempt to hide it, they sense that your decisions, your success, and your composure are untouchable by gossip, criticism, or manipulation. You cannot be swayed by opinions because your strength did not originate from them in the first place. That independence exposes a truth many are not ready to accept. They are influenced far more than they realize. While you have trained yourself to act and succeed regardless of external pressures, the threat is not about what you have accomplished. It is about what your presence reveals. Your confidence highlights the ways others have limited themselves, the ways they have waited for validation instead of taking control. It forces them to compare your self-reliance to their dependency, and that comparison stings in ways they cannot fully admit. People can handle brilliance or talent when it exists within the expected rules of the system. But when someone moves confidently outside those rules without depending on anyone, it unsettles the very foundation they constructed their sense of order upon. That is why watching you succeed without needing them feels dangerous. Your confidence is not loud or arrogant. It is quiet, deliberate, and rooted in real experience. It is the kind of confidence that cannot be shaken or undermined, and it leaves a mark on everyone observing. They are forced to reckon with the fact that their influence over your journey was never required, and that truth is both humbling and maddening. Your presence does not simply inspire, it disrupts because it proves that genuine strength does not ask for permission, and confidence earned alone cannot be controlled. Number 13. Your rise rewrote the social map they believed was permanent. People love to believe the world possesses a fixed order, that there exist invisible rules dictating who leads, who follows, who succeeds, and who remains behind. They quietly assign roles, rankings, and place limits on others, based on observation, assumptions, and convenience. That invisible map provides them comfort because it makes life predictable. They know their place, they know who they can surpass, and they know who will always remain ahead. But your rise shattered that illusion. When you succeeded alone without relying on the support, approval, or guidance of others, you did not simply move forward. You disrupted the social order they believed was permanent. Suddenly, the positions they assumed were untouchable became fluid. The hierarchy they depended upon to feel secure no longer fit reality. You crossed boundaries they believed were fixed, moved past people who assumed you could not, and achieved milestones they assumed were beyond reach. Their mental map of the world, the quiet structure that helped them feel safe and in control, was rewritten in real time. That rewriting is subtle but powerful. Every step you take that surpasses expectation forces them to reassess their assumptions about competence, potential, and influence. People who once felt untouchable in their positions suddenly realize their advantage was never as solid as they believed. Your movement exposes the fragility of systems built on perception, assumptions, and control. It shows that status is not permanent, and success is not guaranteed by position or privilege. It is earned, and sometimes it is earned in silence, while others remain complacent. For those watching, that realization is disorienting. They must confront the uncomfortable truth that the world is more fluid than they believed, that their own perceived security was partly illusion, and that you achieved what they assumed required resources, help, or permission. Your rise does not simply elevate you, it challenges the foundation of the social environment itself. In doing so, you leave people rethinking not just your place, but their own. And the invisible rules they once trusted no longer feel reliable. Your success rewrites their world in ways they cannot ignore, leaving a quiet but undeniable mark on everyone who assumed they possessed control over the map. Number 14. The most brutal truth. You did not need them. The most unsettling reality for the people around you is this simple fact. You did not need them. Not their approval, not their help, not their guidance, not their recognition. While many rely on networks, influence, and permission to advance, you proved that real strength does not request permission. It takes action regardless. Every step you took, every milestone you achieved was the product of your own decisions, your own discipline, and your own persistence. And that truth is devastating for anyone who believed they were essential to your journey. When people invest themselves in your story, mentally or emotionally, they assume their presence, support, or judgment matters. They assume their influence shapes the outcomes, that your path is somehow tied to them. But by thriving without them, you shattered that illusion. Your life became proof that independence, clarity, and relentless focus can outperform expectations, systems, and even the supposed authority of others. They watched, perhaps hoping you would struggle, perhaps even believing they possessed some control over your results, only to realize they were completely irrelevant to the force driving your success. That realization is quiet, but powerful. It does not arrive with shouting or confrontation. It arrives in the subtle shock of watching someone they believed needed them rise effortlessly, consistently, and visibly. Your independence highlights the gaps in their own reliance on others. It forces them to confront their quiet assumptions about power, influence, and necessity. They observe that while they were busy trying to be needed, you were busy becoming unstoppable. And that is why your victory gnaws at them. It is not simply that you won, it is that you won on your own terms, untethered, self-sufficient, and unapologetically unstoppable. Your journey did not simply succeed, it exposed the fragile truth behind the people who watched it unfold. They assumed you needed them. But the reality is far harsher. You needed only yourself. That truth stings because it undermines the subtle control they believed they possessed and quietly proves one undeniable fact. Your life, your progress, and your success were never dependent on anyone else, and nothing they could do could change that. Conclusion. When you examine the journey you have walked, the victories you have quietly earned, and the obstacles you have overcome alone, it becomes clear that your story is not simply about success. It is a revelation. Each step you took without help, each challenge you faced without support, each boundary you crossed without permission sent ripples through the world around you. People who once underestimated you, ignored you, or quietly hoped for your failure are now forced to confront truths they never anticipated. Your rise disrupted their assumptions, exposed their reliance on validation, revealed their hidden envy, and forced them to rethink the social and mental maps they believed were permanent. Your independence, your discipline, and your clarity have created a life that does not simply thrive, it resonates with power. You proved that obstacles do not require permission, that solitude can be a strength, and that the greatest victories are often earned in silence, away from the applause, waiting only for those willing to persist. People watching may feel unsettled, envious, or even frustrated, not because of what you did, but because your journey exposes the limits they have quietly placed on themselves. Every achievement you earn becomes a mirror, reflecting not only your brilliance, but also the paths others refuse to take. This is why your victory is not simply a personal milestone. It is a force that challenges, disrupts, and redefines expectations. It proves that success is not about who is watching, who is supporting, or who is approving. It is about courage, consistency, and the relentless refusal to settle for anything less than what you know you can achieve. You did not simply win. You won on your own terms. And in doing so, you showed the world that the only permission you need is your own. If this message resonates with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss insights that cut through the noise and reveal the truths most people are too afraid to face. Like this video if it hit hard. Comment below with your own experiences of rising alone, and share it with someone who needs to see that success does not require permission. Let us keep building a space where real stories, real victories, and real power are celebrated, because your journey deserves to be recognized in its full, unfiltered glory. God bless you.